Artemis Fowl is without exaggeration the worst Disney movie I've ever seen, and that's not a statement I make lightly. There are Disney movies I think sucked fat asshole, but Artemis Fowl is a whole new beast. This thing stands atop the mountain of asshole that's been sucked and is an unreachable level. This is the raid boss of sucked ass. It is truly terrible in every department imaginable. Nothing in this movie makes sense, nothing flows together. The movie's like 40 minutes long. It's like a fucking speed run of a movie. And by the time the movie ends, you wonder what even happened. Was there a story? Did anything even fucking occur? And if it did, why? It's just a confusing, convoluted mess of dog shit. It is an entire diaper of dog shit. It's truly horrendous, and I can't even believe that it even got put out. This should have just been scrapped. They should have flushed this down the toilet. Something Chris Stuckman mentioned in his review of this film is the teaser trailer for it was almost non-existent in the movie. All the scenes that were shot for the teaser trailer didn't exist in the final cut of the movie that's out right now. There's only like 3 scenes from the trailer that's actually in the movie. Everything else was cut at some point or just never existed in the first place. So I don't know what the fuck happened there. Maybe the movie that got published on Disney Plus is like a rough intern cut for it that they made as a joke and accidentally uploaded. I have no idea. But it is an absolute abomination, a repulsive, putrid petri dish of puke. I can't express enough how bored I was watching it, and then how incredibly confused I was around the mid-game here. So, right away the movie shows you that it's not good, and it knows it's not good. The main character, the lead, Artemis Fowl, the acting is truly terrible, and I don't like saying that because it is a child actor, and I don't even think it's his fault, but there was no direction. It feels like everything that was used was the first take for him. Every single line from Artemis Fowl sounds like it's just being read right off of a script. There's no emotion behind it, there's no like facial expressions, there's no acting, it's just a stoic, neutral face with every single line. It's like in a video game when the animations aren't loading. It just feels so weird. It's like if I was reading the lines. It just sounds like a script reading. It looks like a script reading. It's just weird. I don't know why that would be the takes they'd use, because I'm sure the kid can act. He wouldn't be in a Disney movie if he's not an actor and can't actually act. So I don't know why they'd use only these emotionless moments for like emotionally heavy scenes. I don't think anyone's gonna mind, but I'll get into slight spoilers. There's a character that dies that you're supposed to care about, but none of the characters in this movie have any reason for you to care about them. They're not fleshed out. They have like no relationships with each other that make any sense. For example, one of the main characters becomes a friend of Artemis Fowl after she's been trapped in a cage by him, and then he lets her out of the cage after a while, and she's like, yeah, we can be friends now. Even though she was 3 seconds ago, the scene before, hating him, absolutely fucking hating him, but now they're friends. What I'm saying is there's no reason to care about the characters, but one of the characters is dying, and Artemis Fowl, well, he doesn't care. Or at least that's how it seems, because as the character's dying, the guy's crying, Artemis Fowl, I mean, there's nothing coming from him. He's just sitting there watching him die. He's like, man, this sucks. Bro, you're dying. Dude, this shit. Man, that's tough. You know what? I'll sing you a poem. And then he sings him a poem, all unenthusiastic and monotone. And then all of a sudden the character's not dead because there's a way to not kill the character. That makes no sense, which I'm going to get into now because this entire fucking movie makes no sense. Narratively, it's a true mess of nothing. Absolutely fucking nothing. There's a main villain that kidnaps Artemis Fowl's dad, and they're only going to get his dad back if they find the Oculus, whatever the fuck, I already forgot what it was called. It's called Oculus, but they say it like Acleus or some shit. So then Artemis Fowl has to find the Acleus, and then, eventually he finds the Acleus, and he gets his dad back, and the villain just goes, no! And that's the end of that. You've only have 3 scenes with the main villain. The main villain is in 3 scenes that I can remember. Maybe 4. I can't. Honestly, the whole thing just is like this fucking fever dream. It actually feels like a dream. You can remember bits and pieces of what went on, but you don't know why it all made sense at the time, even though it never made sense at the time in this movie. Nothing in this movie fucking works. Things just happen. Let me give another example here. Well, first of all, there's only 2 locations in this movie. There's the mansion, and then there's the fairy universe. So they saved a lot of money on locations because the whole movie just takes place at either of those 2 locations, nowhere else. So they really saved a pretty penny on that, I imagine. That and the CGI, because the CGI is absolutely terrible. It looks like we just went back in time 20 years. This feels like a movie that would have came out like in the late 90s, maybe, as like a straight to VHS production. But that aside, the example I want to give, there's a fight on Artemis Fowl's mansion because he's got the important thing, And now the time freeze zone is collapsing. And the time freeze zone collapsing is a really big deal. While the time freeze zone is collapsing, the general of the fairies is getting overthrown by an evil fairy. And while the general's getting overthrown by the evil fairy, the general is getting in trouble because the evil fairy is taking over because he's working with the villain. And time zone's collapsing. The overthrowing guy throws a troll into the house to attack Artemis Fowl, beat the troll, time zone collapse. Now the time zone collapsing is apparently like a doomsday apocalypse scenario. Things go wild, everyone's panicking like, holy shit, this is our last chance to survive. The boy's not going to make it. Artemis Fowl is dead because the time freeze is done. And then in the next scene, after hyping it up and showing how bad it can be, Artemis Fowl and everything's fine. The mansion's fine. Nothing happened. What happens is the time freeze collapses. Artemis Fowl says, we need to find cover. So they run off screen. The next scene, they come out of cover. They're like, damn, that was close. And then right after that, the guy who just overthrew the general fairy says, you know what? You can take charge again. I'm a good guy now. With nothing connecting it at all. He just sent the fucking troll in there. Troll got beaten and now he's a good guy again and they accept him as a good guy. It makes no sense. The movie is a fucking disaster. I'm like, maybe there's things I missed because admittedly I was dozing off occasionally for like split seconds. I didn't want to miss a single fucking moment of this movie, but unfortunately it is so unbelievably boring and uninteresting that yes, I was dozing off a little bit. But that only speaks volumes to just how truly terrible it is because I never sleep through bad movies. I don't even think about it because I am glued to an abominable piece of media. I love it. But this is on another level I didn't even think possible, especially not for Disney. It is crazily shit. It's truly terrible. Plugging this into the moist meter, Artemis Fowl is getting a wonderful 10%. And let me explain. It should be 5, but I'm going to explain why it's 10%. There is an element of this movie in being so bad that it does occasionally cross into the realm of being enjoyably bad. That is the only thing that is saving it from a 5% on the moist meter because there is some entertainment to laugh at. And that's the only positive. That's the only positive. And that's really about it. It is awful. That's it. See ya. A question I'm often asked is, what is the worst movie I've ever seen? I've seen a lot of movies, a lot of them real dog shitty. From about 2014 to early 2017, I watched every single horror movie that Netflix put on its catalog. Every single one, no exaggeration. So I've seen some truly abominable shit. I couldn't even tell you the name of half of these. I just have fragments of these movies in my brain, burned in my psyche, like some kind of fever dream. I'm basically the Library of Alexandria for awful horror movies if they ever went to Netflix. Like, I remember some bafflingly awful shit. There was this one movie that I'll never remember the name of. It was about some kids who took control of one of their parents' houses or something, and they stole their pool, and then one of their dads gets shot, and they're like, damn, I guess the pool's no good anymore. I guess we'll give the pool back, I think. Something like that. Maybe that made sense to someone out there. If you know what movie I'm talking about, feel free to let me know. But the point is, I've seen some awful garbage. So the other night on stream, I was asked again, what is my least favorite movie I've ever seen? And I've always had an answer. 2 movies. I say that they're tied for my least favorite movie. It's Superfast and Let's Be Evil. And that night on stream, I decided to pull up the trailer for Let's Be Evil, and it reminded me of just how truly terrible that movie was. So now I have a conclusive answer. My least favorite movie ever is Let's Be Evil. And I want to play you the stream clip real quick, and then after that I want to go over why it's the worst movie I've ever seen, because I recently tried to rewatch it. Least favorite movie of all time? It's probably still Superfast. Superfast or Let's Be Evil? No one's ever heard of this movie except for me. This movie was one of the most miserable experiences I've ever had watching something. And the worst part about Let's Be Evil is I fell asleep twice, and Tiana rewound it so that way I didn't miss anything. So it was just like the movie went on so much longer than the fucking runtime. The movie's about like these 3 babysitters that go to an underground bunker to babysit some very smart children, but the children aren't that smart. All they do is sit there and touch holograms, and then the babysitters go to sleep. And then eventually the children are evil, so they start hacking the holograms, and the babysitters get upset about that, and then the kids get upset at the babysitters. So then, like, they somehow start killing the babysitters through hacking. and then it's revealed at the end that the children chose the babysitters and they run the bunker. Like it's so fucking dumb. Yeah, I take it back. I always say Superfast or this movie. This movie is so much worse than Superfast. Oh, it's so bad. Oh my god, it's so bad. When we watched this movie, like I said, I fell asleep and Tiana would rewind it so I didn't miss it. I honestly thought that night went on for days. Like, it felt like in Bleach when that dude poisons the guy to slow down time significantly. That's what this movie did to me. I didn't understand a single second of what I just saw. Yeah, because this movie, like, they wrote this movie with nothing in it. They had an idea. Let's get some babysitters and some kids. And that's as far as it went. And it's stretched across, like, how long is it? Like an hour and 30 minutes of excruciating agony. You'll watch that movie, an hour and 22 minutes will go by, and you'll have aged 2 years. It's fucking awful. My god. Which one of you asked me what my least favorite movie is? You've made me mad now. Now I had to remember this movie. I need to rewatch this. So, now I've tried to rewatch it. It didn't go very well. I couldn't finish it. This movie, I fell asleep during it again, and this time Tiana wasn't around to wake me up and rewind it. So I dozed off again. This movie is like actual hypnotism for me. I cannot stay awake during this fucking thing. If you're struggling with insomnia, put on Let's Be Evil. It might help you. And if Let's Be Evil doesn't help you fall asleep, try One Piece. That ought to do the trick. I'm 30 episodes in and goddammit, it is boring. But the point is, I fell asleep about 40-ish minutes in. So then I had to fucking rewind it myself when I woke up in order to finish the goddamn movie. And it's awful. It's worse than I remembered it being. But my synopsis was right on the money. Basically, 3 babysitters go to watch some kids do this in the cafeteria. This is all the kids do. Like, half of the time the kids are on screen, they're just doing this with their hands, because there's little holograms. They're all wearing these goofy glasses. The glasses look like the old 3D glasses you'd get at the movie theater, like when you went to go see Spy Kids 3D, so you just have these stupid, goofy glasses on. They look like the wind goggles that you put on dogs. Like if your dog likes to hang his head out the window, you put the goggles on them so they don't hurt their eyes. That's what it looks like. And somehow this movie cost $9.9 million to make. I can't believe it. Then there's also, of course, the AI companion, which I totally forgot about. They have like this little Cortana, and she's built into the augmented reality glasses that they're all forced to wear. Her name's Ariel. She looks like Chaos from the Sonic series, so like this liquid blob of fucking goo. And she's just like, hey, what's going on, pussies? I'm Ariel. I'm a robot. That's about all she really does. And then the whole movie's like, wow, augmented reality's kind of cool. One of the babysitters, his name's Darby, he's spinning a fucking teapot. He's like, whoa. Yeah, because the teapot's not real. It's a hologram. So he's spinning a teapot, and it's like it's crazy. And then eventually they're like, so we're here to save America. Like that's what they're working under, the assumption of like they're here to watch these kids because these kids are gonna save America. So they're being real patriotic. So it's like, okay, let's go watch the kids do this, and whatever. So they go do that. And then eventually the kids are like, hey, no siree, not on my watch. Gonna cut that shit out. So they start killing the babysitters. And then we finally reach the conclusion where it's revealed Cassandra, one of the children, chose the babysitters. So it was all part of their plan the whole time. They just were evil. So, I've looked everywhere online for an explanation for what the fuck this movie was about. No one has any. Not even the most pretentious Redditors have any idea what the fuck went on in this movie, which is shocking. I've never seen that for any other movie ever. This movie is devoid of any and all meaning, purpose, and plot. There's no narrative. The dialogue between the characters is written like the AI in the movie fucking wrote it itself, with no understanding of how human beings communicate with each other. It is shocking. This movie is like if Attaway General tried to make a horror film. It's crazy. This is not a so bad it's good movie. This is the most boring movie I've ever watched, and I don't say that lightly. I would rather play through Death Stranding, start to finish, in one sitting without being allowed to sleep than sit through an hour and 22 minutes of this movie. And Death Stranding is a long fucking game. This is the first Strand-type movie. It is a battle just to stay awake watching this fucking thing. It is awful. Now, this isn't a popular movie, of course. I've never heard anyone mention this ever in the history of human language. I don't think anyone's ever recommended this movie out loud or even typed this in like a text message like, hey, let's watch Let's Be Evil. But there still were quite a few people that were commenting on it on YouTube, IMDb, Reddit, and all of them didn't like it for obvious reasons, but there were a few people I saw defending it. So I was just trying to figure out what they saw in the movie that I might have been missing, because I would have liked to get another perspective. Maybe they really fucking solved this Rubik's Cube of a movie and figured out what it was all about, but they didn't. They just said they liked the colors and the sound effects, or the theme song. So if that's the best compliment you can give to the movie, that the colors were cool and the theme song was great, you didn't do a good job with your movie. I'm sure all of you know by now I love watching shitty movies, I love playing shitty games, I love listening to shitty music, because I find all of it to be entertaining. This movie is not entertaining. There is nothing about this movie that crosses the so bad it's good threshold. It is insufferable. I can't express that enough. I've never had a movie that makes me angry to think about. Until now, this movie insults your time left on this planet. An hour and 22 minutes spent watching this would be better spent doing anything else. Hitting your shins with a hammer for an hour and 22 minutes is a more productive and less painful use of your time. At least then, your shins will start to become a bit stronger, kind of like how Muay Thai fighters kick down trees with their shins in order for the bones to be built up a little stronger. Like, that would be better than an hour and 22 minutes watching Let's Be Evil. It's so bad. So yeah, that's about it. That's the worst movie I've ever seen. So yeah. You all know how much I love horrible, bad movies, and I am just giddy with excitement right now to talk about a movie I just saw that I now consider to be the goofiest film ever made. I just got back from the theater from seeing Moonfall, which is Roland Emmerich's new disaster porn. He's the man behind, like, 2012, Day After Tomorrow, some classics. And with this bad boy, he has created the stinker masterpiece, a smelly magnum opus. This movie, I can't even believe actually exists. I saw it in IMAX because I don't like to just watch a bad movie. I want to feel a bad movie, and goddamn did I feel it deep in my ass. This was an absolutely wild ride from start to finish. If somebody asked me what the best movie ever made was, I'd say Moonfall. If someone asked me what the worst movie ever made was, I'd say Moonfall. I don't know whether to give Moonfall a 100% on the moist meter or a 0. This fucking thing was so beautifully awful in all of the perfect ways. I just can't describe it. It is the actual perfect storm of dog shit put into film. The movie was like 2 hours long, and I swear to God, it felt like 20 minutes. I was upset when this movie ended. I just wanted it to keep going and going. This movie could have ran 8 hours, and I wouldn't have complained if it kept up this intensity. It was an amazing experience. So, spoiler alert, I want to go into it. I really want to fucking peel apart these stinky cheeks and tell you all about this movie start to finish. And let me just go ahead and say, this movie had the audacity to try and hint at a universe, like a Moonfall extended universe, kind of like the Marvel or Star Wars universe they created. Moonfall did that towards the end, and I need a sequel. The human race deserves a sequel to Moonfall. So let's get into it. So the movie starts with our main character, Brian, played by Patrick Wilson, in space with our other extremely important character, I forgot her name already, but played by Halle Berry. That's another thing about this movie. I saw it with Andrew, and the second we left the theater, we couldn't remember a single one of the characters' names apart from, like, Brian and the cat's name, which was Fuzz Aldrin. So, like, that's another thing. Like, all the characters are super forgettable. I'm getting ahead of myself. So, Halle Berry and Patrick Wilson's character, they're in space working on the space shuttle. And there's another character there with them that's helping, and then all of a sudden, a massive cloud of space dust blasts the ship. It tears it to pieces, knocks out Halle Berry, and it sends Brian, like, scrambling to get inside. And then the other guy, who I don't even know if they even gave a name to, his line gets cut, and he just gets sent, like, quadruple backflipping through space for all eternity and dies. And then when they arrive back at Earth, They blame Brian for the whole event, despite there being camera footage of this space dust being the culprit, destroying the ship. They're blaming Brian. They're like, you are a disgrace. Your negligence caused the death of an astronaut and the destruction of so much money worth of, NASA parts. You're going off book now. Get out of NASA. So then he gets fired. His wife leaves him. His kid hates him. He's now like this drunkard who is really just scraping by and struggling. For some reason, the whole trial was public and he's insisting he was innocent. It was this very strange technological space dust that just fucking flew through like a fart. And he traced it back to a corner, like a quarter of the moon called like Mars Capri Sun or something. I already forgot the name of it. But no one believed him. Everyone mocked him. He got fired. His life ruined as a result. And then we're introduced to a very important character called KC. KC is a conspiracy theorist who really cracks the code that the moon is falling out of orbit. And KC believes it's because the moon is actually a megastructure put there by aliens. So he has his own little group of conspiracy theorists that also believe in the megastructures. And he tries very hard to bring this information to NASA to let them know that the moon is out of orbit, shit's gonna get rough. So just like in Majora's Mask, the moon is coming closer to Earth, and the closer it gets to Earth, the worse it is for humans because the gravitational pull from Earth will rip apart the moon, sending all of these giant chunks into the planet, destroying pretty much everything. A doomsday event, an apocalypse. And no one's believing KC, even though he has all of the research and evidence to back it up. So eventually he turns to Twitter. And he makes an anonymous post with all of the evidence, and miraculously overnight the entire world believes him. It becomes the #1 trend, and every single news outlet everywhere is talking about it. NASA comes forward to corroborate it. Now everyone knows, yep, moon's about to fuck our shit up. So then they all try and come up with plans, and I swear to God, every character in this movie makes the stupidest decisions at every possible moment. It blew me away. It's like every character, even the ones that are supposed to be smart, like the scientists, are like lobotomized zombies. They get nothing right. None of it makes sense at all. But even suspending disbelief, you can't help but just sit there and scratch your head like there's no way they just said or did that. I'm trying to sum it up to give you the cliff notes before I start really dissecting it. So once it's been confirmed that the moon's coming to the Earth, Brian, the disgraced astronaut, teams up with Casey. They hang out for a bit, and then Halle Berry, who's still employed by NASA, just out of nowhere sends a helicopter to pick both of them up to help them defeat the moon, because now the moon's like a raid boss. So then they come up with a plan to take an EMP device to the moon. Everyone believes them now. Also, NASA confirmed all of this and then really figured they needed Brian's help, because they sent a crew of 3 astronauts up to check out that crater, and then the giant space dust came up in the shape of like a goddamn ringworm, and it kills all 3 of them. So then they conclude yep, there's something weird and wacky going on with the moon. It's got some kind of artificial intelligence living inside of it. So then that's when Brian and Casey come. My God. I really want to get deeper into it, but I want to give everyone the full overview of the movie so you can see it. This whole movie is taking the insanity of a Neil Breen movie, but giving it $100 million to realize the craziness. A better example for all the weebs. If you've seen Gurren Lagann, where they start underground, and then by the end of the show, they're in space mechs throwing galaxies at each other. It's that, but for pseudoscience and conspiracies. It's fucking mind-blowing. So, Brian, Casey, Halle Berry, they're at NASA. Everyone knows Doomsday's coming, so they're all, for some reason, taking refuge in Colorado. The word Colorado must have been mentioned a million fucking times throughout this movie. This had to be just some kind of propaganda to increase tourism there or something. And also, you see Kaspersky on billboards, and apparently all of NASA is powered by Kaspersky antivirus, because every time they fire on a computer, it just says Kaspersky. And that's all there is on the screen. It's just they look at Kaspersky and things start helping. But I keep getting too specific. Again, everyone's at NASA. They come up with a plan. They get this old EMP device that they're going to take to the moon and blow up the space worm. And this also confirms that space dust that blew up the ship that Brian was on initially were nanobots from the AI. So they've got the plan. They've got the EMP. They've now got Brian to pilot it. But something goes wrong. The moon's getting closer, so an earthquake happens, and it cracks the coolant in one of the engines. And it plays out exactly like this. I'm not exaggerating. Halle Berry and Brian go up to check out what's going on. One guy says, the coolant's leaking and I don't know how to fix it. And no one here can really fix it. And she's like, are you sure? And he's like, yeah. She's like, all right, well, that's the end of the mission. I guess everyone needs to go home. So every single person at NASA, except for Halle Berry, Casey, and Brian, as well as 2 other data analysts and a couple of military guys, all leave and abandon the Earth and just like, yep, I guess we just have to accept this is the apocalypse and there's nothing we can do. Just because one of the coolants was leaking a little bit, and then the solution, I shit you not, was we'll just fly without it. Apparently the entire time they could just fly without it because the moon was close enough, and Casey knew that and then relayed the information a little late to Halle Berry, and she just didn't bother to call anyone back. She's like, all right, well, I already told them they can leave. They can go. We can do it ourselves. So then we get our heroes strapping into the spaceship, ready to take on the moon, and as the moon's getting closer, it's causing gravitational disturbances, so there's water that's getting sucked up, and it's like giant waves of water that are just standing there. And those 2 like data analysts that stayed behind that I briefly mentioned, they get evacuated. They get into a helicopter with the military people because the waves are getting closer as the moon's passing over. And I can't even believe this fucking happened. They take off with plenty of time to escape, but instead of going away from the waves, the goddamn pilot kamikazes into the waves, and it's supposed to be this emotional moment of, oh my god, there is no escape. But like you can see, when the helicopter takes off, it could have just gone right, but instead inexplicably just goes left into the waves. And I'm missing so many impressive details. Brian's son, who hates him, went to jail. Brian got him out of jail. And for some reason, the military flew Brian's son here just to be in like the middle of the shitstorm. So Brian's son's there and then needs to take off in a car away from the facility as the waves are getting closer. But instead of taking off, he goes to a mountain and parks just to check out his dad's spaceship as the waves are getting closer. So the spaceship takes off, it's beating the waves, but his son and then Halle Berry's son is also with him, and then their babysitter are all just in this car, outside of this car watching. And then eventually the kid's like, all right, now it's time to probably go, as the waves are literally like bashing the bumper of the car. It's like, okay, we've had our fun. So then they engage on this high-speed chase against the moon, and then they eventually get hunted by people that are like scavenging for parts. Oh my god, it's so much. So everything on Earth's going to shit. The gravity's all fucked up. Halle Berry, Brian, and Casey are now heading towards the moon, and it turns out the AI that inhabits the moon is attracted to electronics, but only if there's organic life inside of it. So the EMP they brought is useless because the AI won't bite it. So they're using it like bait and trying to fish with it. But for some reason it needs to be inside of it. They don't explain why. The AI was circling it and like playing patty cake with the EMP, and they didn't blow it up for no reason. They just concluded that it needs to be inside. So they get the EMP back and go deeper in the moon, and it turns out the moon is actually a Dyson sphere built by aliens, confirming Casey's theory that also happens to grow potatoes inside of it for some reason. And it's a Dyson sphere encapsulating a white dwarf that it's using for its power source, and the AI is sapping the power from the white dwarf. And then the AI gets alerted to the crew that's in the spaceship that's flying around. And then a door opens in the Dyson sphere as the AI is tracking them, and it shuts, closing out the AI and then saving the crew. And then it turns out that the Dyson sphere wasn't built by just any aliens. It was built by ancient humans, and they communicate to Brian through celestial beams and flashbacks of his son talking to him, kind of like in Mass Effect 3 where the Reapers take on the body of a child. They did that for Brian in order to talk to him. It was a sentient AI being, like it was an AI construct for the Dyson sphere. It was built by humans that billions of years ago were spacefaring, hyper-advanced technological superstars, and eventually they created an AI that turned on them via kind of like Skynet, and it made all of them go extinct. But before their final extinction, they built giant moons that they would toss out to corners of the universe to try and remake humanity elsewhere. And this just happened to be the last surviving one, the only one the AI couldn't find until this movie. So that's the explanation there. Eventually they upgrade the EMP, the AI construct on the moon, like turbocharges the EMP. then gets some defense systems going that just start shooting bullets at the AI, and then they're escaping the moon. Casey blasts open the hatch with himself inside because he says, an organic being needs to be with the technology in order for the AI to bite me. And he's like, oh my god, Casey's gonna die. Brian and Halle Berry are upset, and Casey's like, no, it's fine. So the AI starts eating him, and he's like, you underestimated us. Blows up the EMP. And then, Casey's dead. AI's gone now, so the moon is back. So then the moon leaves Earth, and now it's just this giant Dyson sphere that is now outside of Earth, and everyone's happy. Earth's super fucked. Everything flooded. Everything got absolutely destroyed, but there's still some people left, and now the moon's our friend again. And, yeah, that's not where it ends. So Casey didn't actually fully die. The AI construct on the moon installation actually copied his consciousness into their database, and now Casey has become the moon itself. And the last line is, we have work to do, which hints at expanding the universe and bringing all of the other AI that is still out there into the fold. And my god, I can't wait to see a sequel. I pray there is one, because this was amazing. I am not even doing this justice with my brief explanation. I need to get into the nitty-gritty of it to tell you just how fucking off the wall this shit was. So the billion-year-old humans, they basically just created Halo. They just stole Halo's plot for a little bit. The installations they made back then were Halo rings. They all lived on Halo rings. And the AI they made, for some reason, turned on them like Cortana. Almost in the same fashion. They deemed that humans weren't worth saving and that they were inferior to them, and just started wiping them out inexplicably. Like, this movie is fucking incredible. Like, the visuals were kind of cool. Like, you always like to see those big budget disaster visuals. And when they'd have the moon peeking over the Earth, it looked cool. And they had awesome lines such as, watch out, the moon is rising. And then all of a sudden, like, boats would be flying overhead. Fucking manatees falling onto the ground. Oh my god, it was so good. And there was like an advertisement for a Lexus. Because when there was these people, the scavengers that were hunting down the son, eventually the son meets up with Brian's wife and her new husband that cucked him or whatever. And they're on this high-speed chase, and they can't get away, right? These scavengers, they're so fast, and they want their oxygen tanks. And they're in a Lexus, and they keep zooming in on the Lexus and like throwing it, drifting around. And the dad goes, hold on, I'm putting this into warp speed. And they zoom in on the Lexus logo, and then him turning from economy mode to sport mode. And then it fucking turbocharges and goes wild. Then they're able to outrun him. This movie, man, is actual fucking genius. Like, I can't talk enough about it. Every single moment of this movie, when you think they've run out of stupid juice, finds another way to make it even dumber. And I couldn't appreciate it more. I loved it. I fucking loved it. I don't even know how you make a movie this dumb. On accident, too. Like, this isn't a self-aware movie. There is no self-awareness in this movie at all. There's a couple of jokes, but they're not like self-aware jokes. They're just like general, decently written jokes. But nothing is self-aware. It really takes itself super seriously, and I love that about it. The best kind of bad movie is one where the director really wanted to do something special but just didn't have the talent or the vision to realize it. And this is one of those cases. It is, in every possible department, the best way to make a bad movie. It is the worst and goofiest movie in all of the right ways. I just don't think you could make a movie this stupid on purpose. This movie was just an amazing experience. This was something truly special. If you like bad, shitty movies, this is the movie to go see. This is going to be 2022's best stupid movie, I think. It would be tough to beat this one. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about this because I've had a smile on my face ever since leaving the theater. There's still so much more I could talk about with this movie. I've barely even scratched the surface of lunacy with Moonfall. But it's just, without you having seen the movie, it's not going to make as much sense. And sense is a word that is blasphemous to even use in the same sentence as Moonfall. That word never once crossed the mind of anyone who touched the script for this. The whole movie just felt like it was kids going and then trying to one-up each other. nothing connects logically. Obviously, nothing here is mathematically, scientifically accurate, or even common sense accurate. Like, everything is wrong in the perfect ways. Like, for example, they're able to find everyone in the world just because. So, like, when they find Brian and Casey, they're in, like, this fucking random hotel somewhere, and somehow they just get found because. Or, like, the family is trekking through snow at the very end, and somehow they just make it to where they need to be without dying along the way and then get found. Like, everything, it just happens because fuck it. And I love that about it. It's so shameless in its horribleness. It was amazing. Just an incredible experience that I wanted to talk about a little bit. That's about it. See ya. Avatar: The Last Airbender is one of the best shows ever made. Avatar: The Last Airbender, the movie, is one of the worst movies ever made, and it's significantly worse than you remember it being. When this movie came out, everyone couldn't wait to drop their trousers and take a fat shit on it, just plant a steaming load, because the movie's terrible, so it deserves all the insults and all of the scathing reviews it received. But yesterday, Andrew and I decided to take a bath in the M. Night Shyamalan septic tank and watch this film. It's the first time he'd seen it, and second time for me. I first saw it in 2016 because I'm a bad movie enthusiast, and I wanted to taste the forbidden fruit of the Avatar movie. I'd always heard how horrible it was, and I didn't see it when it first came out in 2010, so I went back to just experience it, and it was miserable. But after watching it yesterday again, I swear to God, M. Night Shyamalan himself has gone back into the movie to change things around to make them even worse. The movie is progressively getting stinkier. I felt like I entered an alternate dimension where the Avatar: The Last Airbender movie was somehow even worse than it was in 2010. I didn't remember half of these scenes being as atrocious as they were, and it hasn't been that long since I saw it. It was shocking, and I don't say this lightly, but I do believe this is one of the worst films ever made. Yes, it is worse than The Room when it comes to its dialogue. The dialogue in this film actually does sound like it was written by Tommy Wiseau if he had just hit 50 whippets in his car. It is baffling that this somehow ended up in a big budget film. And I think it's worse than any student film, any indie film. It's worse than fucking YouTube Halo 3 machinimas. It is unbelievably terrible in every possible department. It's extremely obvious nobody on the production side ever watched the Avatar show because they get the pronunciation of every single name wrong. They don't even call him the Avatar, they call him the Avatar. And everyone already knows this, but his name's not Aang in the movie, it's Ong. Sokka is Sokka. Everything is wrong. It's like they just read a Wikipedia article about the Avatar show and then tried to make a movie off it based on 3 sentences, like a plot synopsis. I can't even wrap my head around how it ended up like this. It tries to cover a lot from the Avatar show. It goes all the way up to the moon spirit, starting from literal bottom, starting from the very beginning. In an hour and 40 minutes, it goes from freeing Aang from the water tribe area all the way up to the moon spirit. And nothing makes sense.
Never have a normal life. I could never have a family.
They said it cannot work with the responsibilities of the Avatar. Why can't the Avatar have a family?
I asked that.
I wanted to show quite a few scenes from this movie while I talked about it to make my points, but I just don't want to take the chance of any copyright violations or anything like that, because God already knows M. Night Shyamalan will get the fucking copyright benders out here and fuck me up. So I'm only going to show bits and pieces here, but here's just an example of a conversation in this movie. It's like 2 Skyrim NPCs malfunctioning anytime characters talk to each other. They don't have conversations. They just vomit out plot synopsis. Just random sentences from the Wikipedia article about, like, Chapter 1 of Avatar: The Last Airbender show. They don't actually talk to each other. And it's also filmed super weird, as you'll see here, where it's like a zoom in on their face, like as if it's under a microscope. Like, I can see every pore on Ong's face here. Why is it such like a hyper close-up? As if I'm trying to, like, look at his DNA, like get down to an atomic level on him. It's shot so poorly. And they turn Katara into a goddamn trivia bot. All she does is say, like, general things about the world at random and ask the dumbest questions of all time. Like, this is a really small excerpt here as an example. When she's on screen, all she's gonna do is monotone ask a question to whoever's near her. It's like she's lobotomized, and all she can do is just ask silly questions. It's like she's Clippy from Microsoft XP who just keeps popping up with a question that you just don't even understand why it's being asked. I don't know why she's even in the movie, because she doesn't do anything. And I don't mean that as an exaggeration. She doesn't do anything besides ask questions sometimes or appear emotionless and say something general about what's going on. For example, there's a scene where Aang runs away, and her and Sokka hear him running away, so they both get up out of bed and they say, "Aang's running away." And Katara says, "He's running away, but he'll probably be back." And that's it. That's like the only thing she contributes to the film in every scene, is just saying things that everyone can already see, or asking questions that are either already being answered or have no place in the film in the first place. She doesn't even waterbend. There's only 3 scenes, I believe, where she's waterbending. 2 of them she fails. Well, 4 actually. The 4th scene they forgot to use special effects, so she's like bending water, but they didn't put any special effects, so it's just like a calm river underneath her while Aang's looking impressed. So I imagine what was supposed to happen is she was supposed to be like lifting water up, but they just forgot to add that. So 4 scenes where she's supposed to be waterbending. One of them, they didn't even add the effects. And then the other scene is she just gets hit by fire. So in the first 2 scenes, the waterbending fails. The last scene at the very end of the movie, where she's facing off against Zuko, she makes 2 water barriers, blocks 1 fireball, gets hit and knocked out. That's it. That's like the last time we see her. She doesn't do anything. I don't even know why she's here. She's just a fucking punching bag. And Sokka, I can't even imagine what M. Night Shyamalan told the actor to do, because when he's on screen, he just looks like he's always on the verge of tears. Like, he's always so serious, and he only has one look in this entire movie. He's like Derek fucking Zoolander. All he does is when he's on screen, he does this. Forever. He doesn't fight. He doesn't contribute anything. He doesn't even really talk. He doesn't make jokes like Sokka does in the show. He is nothing. He is a fucking android that is malfunctioning. Like, you would expect for a big budget movie like this, they would hire actors that actually wanted to be there, but I felt like all of them were just counting down till they could go home. None of them even tried, except for Zuko. Zuko is actually played by a really talented actor named Dave Patel. He's the only one that even gives a fuck in this film, but even he is dog shit here. But he's the only one that I could see was even trying to act. The other ones just sound like they're voice acting on Disney Junior.
How'd you get all the way out here?
I ran away from home. We got in a storm. We were forced under the water of the ocean.
Oh, I see.
Wow.
It wasn't very smart. I was just upset.
They're just literally explaining a plot summary of the show.
Yeah. With about the same delivery as me reading it in my head. The way the characters deliver their lines sounds about as enthusiastic as I do when I wait in line at the DMV and then have to fill out some shit. Like, they just seem so unbelievably bored to be there. And the movie, the most criminal thing about the movie is just how boring it is. Because like I said, they try and covered a lot from the Avatar show in a short amount of time. Thus, the majority of the movie comes out exactly like what you just saw, where they're just vomiting plot summary at each other with nothing else happening. Now, this film had a $150 million budget, so you would expect with that much money behind it, at least the fighting and the effects would look good. No. It's made in Adobe After Effects, it feels like, or Sony Vegas. Like, it's fucking trash. Look at this.
Oh my lord! Here it is!
Yeah.
Yeah!
Whoa! Watch out!
You kid!
This is an actual scene in the final cut of the film. Fucking 10 earthbenders doing an interpretive dance in order to summon a small pebble and slowly push it towards their opponent. This is actually the scene out of Austin Powers when he's in the fucking steamroller and slowly about to run over that guy. And he just keeps screaming. That's the action in this entire movie. It's just people standing there waiting to slowly be hit by something, whether it's a small pebble from the earthbenders or a slight gust of wind from Aang, excuse me. He doesn't use any cool airbending. Like, when Aang is fighting, he is summoning, like, actual puffs of wind. Like, as much wind as I generate just blowing out. That's what you see on screen for the fights. It's so fucking bad. Also, firebenders can't generate flames on their own in this movie. They need a fire source nearby. So the whole film falls apart at the end, where they could just extinguish the flames around the city and the firebenders would be powerless. Because the waterbenders could just throw water on all the torches that light up their city, and the firebenders wouldn't be able to fight back. Because for some fucking reason, M. Night Shyamalan decided to completely change how the bending works for them. So they needed a nearby fire source. Thus, the whole thing could have been avoided by just... If they just said, oh, here's the Fire Nation coming in. Alright, extinguish those torches. Then they're worthless. The film is so unbelievably silly.
That's the M. Night Shyamalan twist.
Oh, it's just like Lord of the Rings.
It is. It's as memorable and good, too.
Yeah. You didn't feel like writing a speech or a line, so you said go up there and make a noise. That right there is the only good piece of dialogue where one of the guys just goes up and instead of giving a speech just goes because they just decided not to write dialogue or anything inspirational. Just this random fucking dude goes up there and just makes a goofy noise. That's about as much effort as that went into the entire film. That's the perfect summary of this film. Just go up there and do whatever. I don't care. I got paid a lot of money to make an Avatar movie, but I don't feel like doing any amount of work to make it good. This movie is beyond bad. This movie is like getting a colonoscopy while wide awake for it. It is painful. M. Night Shyamalan's known for his twists in movies, and the biggest twist about the Avatar movie was that it was the worst fucking thing you'll ever see in your life. So if you like the show, get ready to get slapped in the face. It is so much worse than I remembered it being. And it hasn't been that long since I've seen it. It is so fucking bad. And I've only scratched the surface. I wanted to do a really in-depth dive on it, but I just don't really want to risk like a copyright violation or anything, so I'm going to refrain from doing that. I'm just giving you the general basis on why it's so bad and what makes it so awful. There is not a single moment in this entire film that is even remotely interesting or well done. There is no character besides Zuko that even tries a little bit. And even Zuko, who's by far the best performer in this film, does an awful job. Because I really feel like M. Night Shyamalan told everyone to do terrible. Like, go out there and give it your absolute worst take. Andrew made a good point. He said Shyamalan probably just took the 70th take of each scene so all the actors were exhausted. That's the only explanation for how it ended up so bad, and how every single character in here is so poorly done. It makes no sense that this fucking film is in the state that it's in. And yeah, I just wanted to talk about it a little bit since I rewatched it yesterday. That's about it. See ya. I know it's late, but I just need to whine and complain and rant about a movie I just saw really quickly. You know how much I love bad movies that are so bad that they're good. I think it's the most fun you can have is getting together with friends and watching absolutely atrocious movies or shows that you can laugh at and make fun of together. And there was a new banger, or so I thought, that was coming out called Pope's Exorcist. This is Russell Crowe as what I thought would be like a John Wick of exorcists, going out there and just slapping demons around, like actually kung fuing them and like overpowering them, fist fighting. Like that's the impression I got from the trailer. I thought it was going to be like absolutely wild and nutty. And I just came back from the theater after seeing it, and my god, there's just a lot that I need to talk about in terms of disappointment and bewilderment that this movie even got made in the first place. So I'm going to treat this like a little confessional here and own up to some sins. Seeing this was a sin. And I understand the Lord forgives all sins, but I feel like after he takes a peek at the Rotten Tomatoes 83% audience score, he's going to flood the earth again out of pure embarrassment for even making our species. This movie is so far from an 83%, it's laughable. It is not good by any means. I don't know why the audience score is so high. Like, it is guilty of more sins than any of the demons in the film. Well, even though there's only one main demon. It is the most generic horror schlock of all time. But its biggest crime is being boring. It borrows every single generic horror plot point, every generic horror movie cliche of like, you know, sitting up from the bed like the Undertaker because the child's possessed and he has like a deep demony voice. Every single like horror movie trope is just ham-fisted into this. All of it dumped into this witch's cauldron and brewed into a disgusting stew. Like, it is not even done in a fun way. There's nothing creative or enjoyable about it. It's boring mostly, though there are some fun moments, like fun bad moments that I'll talk about. But overall, I am just blown away by how uninteresting the film was after seeing the trailer. The trailer got me hype. I knew this wasn't going to be a good movie. I don't feel like anyone with a working pair of eyes would watch the trailer for The Pope's Exorcist and be like, wow, that might be pretty damn good. Like, that was never a thought that crossed anyone's mind, I doubt. But I as well as many others, I imagine, were under the impression like, wow, this will be like entertainingly silly. But it really wasn't. It didn't even try to be scary, first of all. Like, that was the wildest thing to me. It really didn't even try to be a horror movie. Its scares mainly consisted of the standard lift people up using, Jedi Force powers and throw them around a room, or knock over a couple of crosses. Well, and I guess there is, of course, the cliche of, like, bone snapping, walking on all fours. But past that, it doesn't even really try to build tension. There's not even jump scares, which is like the easiest slam dunk for horror films where they could just throw in a bunch of jump scares and people are like, oh my god, it was horrifying. But it didn't even bother with that. It just does nothing. It's just so bland. It's just an empty calorie of a film. I did something I very rarely do. I took notes during this film because I was so dumbfounded by what I was watching. So I'm just going to go over it start to finish. There will be spoilers. There's a lot I want to talk about. So Russell Crowe hops back in the saddle here, dusting off the acting chops to tackle the lead role of a powerful exorcist named Gabriele Amorth. And the film opens with him performing an exorcist on a guy who's struggling with the devil coming over him. So he's bouncing around the bed all crazy like a toddler going through a sugar rush. And Gabriele is asking him questions like a little interrogation. What's my name? What do you want? Who are you? You're Satan, aren't you? You're Satan. And then he's like, yeah, I'm Satan. I'll possess anyone. I know everything. And then Gabriele's master plan is he brings in a pig and he's like, I don't believe you. You're not Satan. If you were Satan, you could possess this pig. And he's like, yeah, I could possess that pig. I could fucking possess him. Watch me possess that pig. And Gabriele's like, do it. Possess that pig. So then he does, and then the guy is back to normal. And then once the Satan is inside the pig, they just blast the pig's head off with a shotgun. Which honestly set the bar pretty high immediately, because I was like, okay, that was fun, silly, bad. He just literally did, like, fucking middle school reverse psychology on Satan. What a fucking buffoon to fall for that one. The oldest trick in the book. It's then explained a few scenes later that this wasn't a real possession. This was mental illness. And Gabriele was just doing a bit of theater. But he really did just execute that pig right in front of that guy in order to convince him that the demon was no longer there. And because he executed that pig, he then had to go through like a religious legal proceeding where he stood trial with these other bishops that were like, this is unnecessary. You're performing exorcists. It's not, there's no such thing as this evil, we don't need this kind of big exorcist position anymore. You're out of line, Gabriele. We don't really need you anymore. So Gabriele's like, you guys don't know what real evil is. Even if 98% of them are like mental illness and not real possession, there's still 2% that's just pure evil and you need me. So then he walks out, but not before making a goofy noise. So as he turns his back to him, and it turns out Gabriele was also like a lawyer at one point or something, I believe he mentioned. So this was actually like a Saul Goodman moment where he was just like defending himself in religious court. And it ultimately ends with them being like, yeah, we don't really need you. So Gabriele storms off, and then as he's about to exit the door, he goes, woo for no fucking reason. Because it was something he did earlier to a group of like nuns that walked by him. I guess that was like a catchphrase they tried, or like a calling card they tried to use for the very beginning of the film and then forgot about it because he never does it again after these two scenes. But there was a group of nuns that walked by him and he goes, like literally blowing raspberries at them, and they giggle and walk by. So then he does it again after that whole religious legal proceeding. And he drops it after that. But it started fun bad. It was like, oh, this is super silly, but it seems almost self-aware and I'm having fun. But then it totally loses all of that charm. The core part of the movie then unfolds where a family just went through a loss with their father and a woman's husband passing away, and the only thing they have left is this giant estate, this holy ground that they're getting like renovations done to. So there's a ton of workers, and they end up unearthing something unholy. Now, before getting to that, the family is as cookie cutter as it gets. The mom's, strong on her own. She's mentally sound, like she's doing everything she can for her children. They mean the world to her. The daughter is a rebellious teen who, I'm not exaggerating, first thing when she gets in the house is goes up to one of the workers, grabs a cigarette, asks for the light, gets a light with the cigarette, then sits on the balcony over the front porch, and the mom's like, "Put that cigarette out, what are you doing?" And she's like, "Ugh!" And then walks off, storms off, mad at her mom. So this was as cliche as it gets with a teenage girl and teenage angst. And then, of course, she's always listening to, like, loud music and hates her mom. Like, "Oh, Mom, you're being such a square. Get out of my room, Mom. I'm busy listening to music." So that's her whole character, which means nothing because after, like, 10 minutes, none of this shit matters, but that's her. And then they also have a son, a younger brother. He's like 12 or something, I don't really know, but he's traumatized because he watched their dad die. So it wasn't like some kind of normal passing or anything. It was some kind of car accident that wasn't fully explained, but he ended up getting impaled through the head, and the son sat there and watched it. So he was traumatized from it and refused to talk. Now, after all of this is established over the course of like a 5-minute speed run of getting across the most two-dimensional characters of all time, that child is exploring the house, and he goes into the basement and he sees like this glory hole, and he takes a peek through it, and there's like a door with symbols on it, and it ends up kind of possessing him. It sinks its fangs into him. This is how the demon gets in. He literally comes in through the fucking glory hole in the basement. So the child ends up immediately getting possessed within the first couple of minutes of being there. And then some of the workers go into the basement, and they also notice the glory hole. They're like, "Oh man, this is absolutely absurd. Is there no decency? Where's the class?" So they're peeking through the glory hole, and one of them lights a flare and was going to put the flare through the glory hole, but it ends up turning into a flamethrower and cremating them, which scares off all the other workers. So then all the other workers leave, and then it's just the family left in the house with their child who is now possessed. Everything I've explained right now happens almost instantly. Like, all of this was so quick, there was no build up to any of it, no tension at all. It was done as quickly as possible to get to, like, I guess what they deemed to be the scary parts, with the child having like a demon voice and saying crude, creepy things. But anyway, after the possession, the Vatican gets word about this, and then they send Gabriele out there, like, "Gabriele, I've got real scary stuff happening at this location." He's like, "I'm on it, Chief. Give me my badge and my gun, I'm going in." So Gabriele is then sent there like some kind of fucking religious assassin to take down a demon. And I really thought he was going to roll up in like some kind of Justice League jet, like or something right out of the X-Men where they have like crazy fucking jet. I thought he was going to fly in on some high-tech shit, but then he rolls up in a moped. So he just kind of scoots on in on his moped, shows up to the house in order to start attacking the demon. And the demon, which is possessing the boy, is a real wacko. Like, this guy's a goofball. So before Gabriele gets there, like right before he gets there, the mom notices something's wrong with the child. He's kind of bedridden and he looks pale. And then he starts talking in a not really deep voice, but you know that like goofy voice you'd make as a child growing up, like the like that kind of shit where you like vocal fry yourself and then try and make it deeper. That's the voice, the very cliche horror movie demon voice. And the mom then hugs the child in order to like, calm him down. And while that's happening, she looks down and it turns out the child is squeezing her titty. And then she's like, "Oh, goodness gracious." And he's like, "You didn't breastfeed me enough, mommy." I shit you not. That is what he says. And she's like, oh God. And she like covers herself up even more. And then he starts laughing about like squeezing her tit. And then he says, "Bring me the priest." So they brought in a priest that wasn't Gabriele first. His name was Thomas, and it was a bigger mismatch than when Krillin tried to fight Frieza. Thomas shows up and immediately gets fucking ragdolled by that demon. He gets thrown out of the room and he's like, "Good heavens, this is a little much for me. We're gonna need the big guns." So he leaves and then Gabriele shows up. So then it's the two of them and they try to tag team the demon in order to, solve this situation. So Gabriele gets in there and he starts his interrogation. And the demon immediately showcases that he's more powerful than all the other ones Gabrielle's seen because he knocks a cross off the wall. Like, I'm so tired of seeing that in horror movies where, like, this really powerful demon can only do, like, a couple of trivial things like blow over a vase or move a chair slightly or throw a bucket of dirt against the wall. It's like, who cares? It's not intimidating. That's fucking embarrassing. But Gabrielle's like, oh, jeepers creepers. And then he's like, what's my name? And the demon gets it right. He's like, you're Gabrielle Amorth. Then he gets blasted with memories from his past, sins that he hasn't fully forgiven himself for. So there's, like, a moment where he's in a war, and then there's like a lady, and then the demon pukes up a bird, and then Gabrielle's like, oh, I'm out of here. So then he fucking waddles out of the room, goes up to the other priest, Thomas, and he's like, okay, that guy means business. So then he instructs Thomas to confess his sins to him so they can't be used against him when they go, talk to the demon again. So Thomas is like, all right, it's been 8 months since I went to confession, and he starts to confess his sins. And Gabrielle's like, 8 months? Okay, this is going to take too long. He's like, okay, Lord, all of his sins are forgiven. He's very sorry, trust me. So he literally uses a cheat code to forgive his sins on behalf of God, which I thought was, like, almost disrespectful. It's like, what the fuck? Can you do that? Like, are you allowed to do that? Like, do you have the power to just say, like, all of his sins are forgiven without him actually confessing it? It's like, damn, that was weird. Like, he had no interest at all in hearing, like, the sins he was going to confess to. He's just like, yeah, whatever, you're fucking good. Literally just gives him the stamp of approval, and he's like, all right, time to go. And when they get into the room, unsurprisingly, the first thing the demon does is show Thomas his sins that he has clearly not been absolved of. It looks like Gabrielle didn't have the authority to do that, so he immediately just gets blasted with his sins, and the demon calls him Panty Sniffer. He says that he fucks the daughters of members of his congregation. And then this makes Thomas very upset that he'd mentioned that. So Thomas goes over to him, the child that's possessed by the demon, and two hands strangles him and shakes him like Homer Simpson strangling Bart. It was so goofy. And Gabrielle's like, please, Thomas, no, don't do it. That's what he wants. As the child's like, getting fucking strangled by Thomas. That was a good fucking silly scene. But after that, then the demon laughs and then he targets Gabrielle. And he's like, you know what I want to do, Gabrielle? I want to fuck you. I want to fuck you so hard that when you start coming, you're going to feel ashamed by the release. I'm not kidding. That was his statement. Like, when asked about his main goal, it was to fuck Gabrielle. And not, like, in a literal sense, to fuck Gabrielle, at least from the way he was speaking about it. Which was jarring to hear that. It was so weird. It was so fucking weird. And then they start trying to get, like, the religious artifacts out on him, like, the power of Christ compels you type shit. And it's not working. The demon then turns off the lights, which, for some reason, makes them stop immediately. And I'm kind of just giving you, like, an overall plot summary of everything that happens here, but I want to stress, and I can't stress enough how there is at no point any attempt to even build tension or show you unnerving things or make anything scary. It's like AI generated a script of a horror film without figuring out how to execute on the scares that they're copying from all of the horror films before it. Like, it is so bland. But anyway, after the lights go out, Gabrielle and Thomas split up. Gabrielle then goes outside and notices that there's a seal of the Vatican on, like, a well. So he ties a rope to the top of the well and then his moped and drives it, and then, which, takes the lid off the well. Thomas is still inside, posted up, making sure, like, the demon child's not up to any silly stuff, any fishy business. But then things start popping off. The mom has, like, a giant arm come over her while she's sleeping, and I don't even know how she's able to even, like, fucking find the time to go to sleep with the demon child always yelling and screaming and, like, throwing things around the room. Well, that's an exaggeration. Knocking things around the room lightly. But she's, like, in bed trying to sleep, and then a giant hand comes over her face and drags her into the mattress slowly. And then the daughter, who's in her rebellious stage, is trapped in a closet with, like, a bunch of, like, scratches going across the wood next to her. And Thomas is there, and he, approaches the demon about it, like, stop it, demon. And then the demon bites his ear, like full-blown Mike Tyson bites a piece of his ear, and Thomas is like, oh my, you didn't just do that. Like, he didn't yell or scream or anything. He gets his ear bitten off, and he just looks more like inconvenienced than anything. He's like, ugh, there goes a piece of my ear, zoinks, god damn it. And then he just, like, walks back out. So Gabriele then realizes that there's a lot more at play here than they originally thought. There's a bigger mystery afoot now that he's opened this well, and he sees a bunch of like skeletons, and then he drops a piece of fire paper in there to see how deep the well goes, which of course causes it to erupt like a goddamn volcano again, just like what happened with the glory hole. And then Gabriele rushes back in, sees all the chaos. He pulls the mom out from the bed, and then he opens the closet door where the daughter was getting attacked by little scratches, and he's like, "This is not a good place to do that, so please stop. Cease that foolishness." And the demon stops, and then the girl leaves the closet. And then we have the most generic plot device when it comes to horror films ever. Gabriele reveals that all they need to do in order to save the day is learn the demon's name. This is something that has been used in every fucking horror movie that deals with demons or possession since the beginning of fucking time. It is so lazy and boring, but that's the major plot point. It's them then needing to find out what the demon's name is. So they start exploring. They also confront the demon again, who reveals what his real plot was: to possess Gabriele. He didn't want to just possess the family, he wanted Gabriele. So they're exploring the premises. They eventually find that glory hole and they bust it open. They go inside the area. Turns out it's a catacombs where there's a bunch of these skeletons all over the place. And then while this is happening, the like super high tier bishop, like max level bishop that sent Gabriele here in the first place, then starts having a panic attack. He's like, "It's worse than we thought." He read like a letter or something from like a book of reports that they keep getting about the situation. He's like, "Oh my goodness." So he starts freaking out. He's like, "Ah." And then he has like a little mini heart attack. He ends up in the hospital. And as they're exploring the catacombs, they're learning like, wow, this dates back like fucking 400 years ago. Like, this demon's been around for a long time, and the Vatican tried to seal it off and cover it up. And then while that's going on, the priest is laying, like the high bishop is laying in bed, surrounded by some of the priests that were part of like the religious legal proceeding. And then he pulls off his oxygen mask and just pukes up blood on one of them. So I guess he was starting to get like possessed too to some level, or he was really just stressed out about the situation. But they eventually find this almost ritualistic chamber. I can't remember exactly what it was for, but it has like a torture device in there. It also then has like what was a very strong priest back in the day on like a throne, and they read his diary, and in that diary they learn the demon's name. It's Asmodeus, and he can possess a lot of different people. He's like a fucking puppet master. And Aaron, I saw this with Aaron as well as Ridley, Eli, and Tiana. Aaron made a great point. If the whole thing is you only need the demon's name in order to win, that super strong priest must have been really lacking. Like, he must have been fucking, overdosing on Xanax or something and really dropped the ball, because he literally had Asmodeus' name not only written down in the diary or written down in the book, but had a full fucking picture, hand-drawn painting with like a stylized Asmodeus name under there. So like the name was readily available, and was still unsuccessful in the exorcism and saving the day. So that guy must have fucking sucked. He must have been terrible at his job. So they learn the demon's name is Asmodeus. As they learn that, one of the other priests that was really mean to Gabriele walks through and sees that the Lord on the crucifix is bleeding a little bit, and he's like, "No!" And then he takes a sabbatical and leaves for some reason. So now they have the demon's name. They then confront the demon. They're trying to like win, but the demon, starts possessing the daughter. He still has the son. He's like writing things on his chest like, "God isn't here. God is not welcome. No God allowed. This is a demons only club." And he's like, strangling someone with Thomas with his tie. The demon girl that he's now possessed is like slapping the mom around. And then Gabriele, in order to stop the madness, is like, "All right, fine, just possess me." So he does. Asmodeus then possesses Gabriele. His plan was to infiltrate the Vatican in order to cause mayhem and wreak havoc. And so he goes downstairs into the throne room and he grabs a giant scepter, and Thomas walks in like the fucking action movie hero. And then he sees the girl that he fucked from the congregation. She's got like her titties out and shit and starts fighting. They get into a fist fight. She's covered in blood. Gabrielle is still trying to fight back against Asmodeus, but it's not winning. Thomas then has like this little coin or something that he pushes on the forehead of the girl, which blows her up, literally insta-gibbs her like it's Team Fortress 2. And then Gabrielle's in like a one-on-one battle with the demon. I also totally forgot a core component here because I'm getting lost in the sauce explaining it. But one of Gabrielle's big sins that the demon keeps showing him is a long time ago, there was a lady who they thought was possessed. Gabrielle went there and learned it wasn't a possession, it was a mental illness. She was just talking about like sexual abuse, trauma and stuff, and Gabrielle's like, I'm not really equipped to handle that. And then she bit the head off of a bird in front of him, and he's like, yeah, this is just mental illness. And then she ends up killing herself right in front of him, and Gabrielle feels immense regret for not helping her and working on the mental health side of exorcisms. So that's why he swore to like do that from that point forward, but he never forgave himself. So the demon's showing him that, and then after Thomas blows up that girl, they also, the sound effect they used for the blowing up was fucking fantastic. I'm actually pretty sure it came straight from Counter-Strike after you armed the bomb. It sounded outrageous. So after that, Gabrielle is wrestling with that girl, shaking her around, and then Thomas throws him like a powerful religious artifact, and he fucking sticks it on her head, throws her into like this pit of water, and then starts reading the demon's name to it and vanquishing it to hell, and saves the day. Family's safe, demons back in hell, and then we have the ending of the film, which once again brought it back to a silly bad state, where the high bishop that puked blood, I guess, is totally fine now. You know, maybe that's just something he does when he's stressed out, I guess, but like he wasn't even possessed or anything. He's just like totally fucking fine. The other priest that took a sabbatical gets replaced, and then they bring in Thomas and Gabrielle, and they're like, yeah, this was a serious situation, but it's 1 of 200. You've only solved 1 out of 200. There's still 199 more to go. Are you willing to take up the task? Like actual Marvel Avengers, Nick Fury recruiting them level shit. And Thomas is like, let's get to business. And Gabrielle reaches back for a handshake and says, let's go to hell. And that's where it ends. Literally setting it up for sequels, like a fucking Men in Black style universe for this, where they're just going to different places and performing exorcisms. So that was the whole film in a nutshell. The reason I wanted to explain all of it is because explaining it makes it sound far more fun shitty than it is. Everything I explained in theory is fun bad, but in execution is fucking awful. I don't really know what the purpose of this movie was, because like I said, it doesn't even really try to be scary or unnerving. It's actually just kind of a genuine waste of time. There are entertaining moments, like I said, there are times where it is goofy, fun, bad, but that's not the overall experience with the film. Like, there were times where we laughed at the silliness, but most of the time it was just sitting there in silence, wasting time watching it. It just didn't do anything in general. Like, it just didn't do anything. It was just kind of a fucking mess of a film where it had like DNA of all of the horror films before it, but didn't even bother to execute it in any meaningful way. It didn't even try. Like, it literally feels like they didn't try at all. That just they had some kind of contractual obligation to fulfill, so they just fucking pooped this out as quickly as possible. It really seemed like it was very rushed. But yeah, I wanted to talk about it because I was very excited to see this movie. I've talked about it on stream a few times about how like I'm really confident that this will be a fun bad movie, and I was just wrong. It really wasn't fun bad at all. So yeah, I just kind of want to talk about it a little bit and rant. That's about it. So yeah. There's a new movie out right now called Imaginary. I bet most of you watching have never heard of this film before in your life, and those of you that have heard of it, I imagine 0 of you had any interest in going to see it, because even just from the first trailer, anyone with eyes would recognize this movie had no chance at being anything even close to decent. It was doomed from the start. It's a movie about a haunted bear imaginary friend. It's as creatively bankrupt as it gets. I would sooner buy a ticket to watch the feature film of The Poop That Took a Pee than going to Imaginary. But I actually did go see Imaginary, so that point doesn't really work. That's moot. I saw it yesterday and can confirm beyond a shadow of a doubt, it's horrible. It's trash. It's terrible. This is the latest super stinker from Blumhouse. More like Butthouse, because this shit is ass. I am no stranger to bad movies, as all of you know. I have a huge passion for seeing them. But man, Blumhouse is pumping out some extraordinarily boring ones. It feels like they're not even trying with anything anymore. They just know that because the budget is so low for these movies, and there's so many people in the world that just want something to do, they'll make a profit off those just curious enough to buy tickets to pass time. So they don't even bother putting in the bare minimum amount of effort to even produce something that has a single redeeming quality about it. Like, I'm pretty sure Imaginary was probably filmed in like 2 weeks because they just used the first take of everything that they shot and then just called it a wrap and said, print it, good enough. So I saw it yesterday with Aaron. Aaron and I have been seeing pretty much every bad movie of the last year or so together, and this is definitely a bad movie that we experienced, and I kind of want to just dissect it here. Not for any reason other than I saw it, so I kind of just want to debrief about it. I know none of you are interested in seeing it, but I don't care. I'm going to peel your eyes open and make you understand why this movie turbo sucks. The best compliment I can give Imaginary is it's better than Night Swim, which is a very low bar to pass, but it is better than Night Swim. That's the Blumhouse movie from January, which is all about a haunted pool. Big congrats to Imaginary for being able to beat that. What an achievement. The accomplishment cannot be understated. It's better than Night Swim. Put it on the back of the DVD box. Before getting super deep on Imaginary, I want to go ahead and thank World of Warships for sponsoring this video. Big thanks to World of Warships for sponsoring this video. I've been working with the World of Warships team for quite some time to design some custom in-game content, so I'm a commander in the game now. I go by Chuck Blast on the seas out there, and I'm an absolute menace. The name of our ship is the Blastmaster. We sail under Chuck's flag, so I help design the assets, the camo, just kind of top to bottom. It looks like me, it sounds like me, because I do the voice acting for it. Dead on target. I'm, for all intents and purposes, engaged in war out there, and it's extremely fun. Just as a reminder, sales to purchase my custom character, my commander, Chuck Blast, which has my voiceover, as well as the custom skin and flag, ends on March 24th. So make sure to get it before it's gone. You can of course still use my invite code PenguinZ0 as well to get all of these goodies too. It's available for PC and consoles, and the code is for newly registered players, but existing players can acquire these items by purchasing my bundle or through the new internet's containers. So you can click the link in the description to get started. Thanks again, World of Warships. Imaginary begins with a man and a woman lying in bed together, and the woman, Jessica, has just had another nightmare where she's attacked by a spider, a big spooky spider. And in order to start combating these nightmares she's having, they decide to move in early to their new house, which actually isn't a new house, it's Jessica's childhood house. And she's forgotten her entire childhood, basically, talking about how foggy it is. She's got like amnesia, so she can't remember her childhood due to a bunch of trauma, which is a really convenient plot device. So she is the stepmom in this relationship, and the father has two children, two daughters. And they all move in together, and the older daughter doesn't like Jessica, but the younger daughter's more receptive to Jessica as like the new mother. And the dynamic there isn't really explored at all past the older sibling just going, "You're not our real mom. We were happier without you. We want our real mom back." And their real mom shows up in this movie for like 2 minutes for a jump scare. So the previous wife had some kind of mental illness that was never really explained or explored, but for one scene, the mom was having a tea party with the daughter late at night and then jumped at Jessica and fell over and then got taken away via ambulance. That was the like original mom's role in this film. That's it, and she's never seen again. This movie actually has a habit of doing that, where they just introduce these characters just for them to never be seen again for just a completely inexplicable reason. So like the father here, he barely has a role to play in this movie. So they move into this house, and within like 2 days, the dad's like, "All right, time to pack up. I gotta go on tour." So I shit you not, he puts on a fedora, packs his suitcase, and he's like, "All right, are you sure you guys are gonna be okay, Jessica?" And she's like, "Yeah, absolutely. Go on your tour. I know the Blood Farts are really killing it this year on the Billboard Top 100. Go play your hit song, fucking Drops of Jupiter. Yeah, get out there." So he's like, "All right, well, I'm going on my tour." And he is never seen or even mentioned again. He tips his fedora and then just falls into the back rooms, and we just have to accept that he's just gone. We lost him. And he will never be seen again. They don't even mention him ever again, actually. Which is, I mean, whatever, I guess. So then it's just Jessica and the two girls, and they're trying to get along. Jessica's making her best efforts to be like this superstar mother, and the youngest daughter has found a bear in the house named Chauncey. And she's talking to the bear. It's her new imaginary friend, and at first Jessica's really supportive of it, but then things start getting really sinister when Chauncey starts wanting to play a game with her where she's like hurting herself. She's about to like slam her hand on a nail, and Jessica has to stop her from it, and that's when she realizes that this imaginary friend is not good for her because it's making her do dangerous things. So that's like the main plot line there. This imaginary friend is real and trying to get the little girl to do a ritual to join him in the imagination land, which is a fucking stupid concept. But there's also a lot of other things that don't really matter in here at all. So, for example, the older daughter meets a neighborhood kid whom she's like in love with instantly. So she invites that dude over when Jessica's out one day. And the dude comes over and immediately makes enemies with the younger daughter. He's like, "You're a psycho." And then that was the end of that. And then for some reason, he's like, "So do you want to do these drugs with me?" So he pulls out a bag of pills, and then he has one on his tongue. He's like, just to show he's doing pills. And he was talking about how, like, last time he did these, his left eye could see 12 seconds in the future. And the older daughter's like, "Nah, I don't really want to do those pills. I thought we were just going to, like, watch this movie and hang out." And he's like, "Fuck, this is so lame. Let's get some alcohol." So he breaks into, like, the dad's stash of booze and immediately breaks it, goes upstairs. And this is supposed to showcase the very first time horror in this movie. To this point, they hadn't had any elements of horror outside of that nightmare she had, which was super lame, where she gets attacked by a spider. I'm going to go ahead and mention the monster design in this movie is terrible. Aaron said it best, where he said the monster creature design in this film is just marginally better than Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, but it's a close match. It's like they went to Party City, and they took costumes off the rack, and then just threw some mud on it, and then added some really, really quick Adobe After Effects VFX to it, and called it a day. It looks awful. It looks like Mummy 2, The Rock, Scorpion King levels of bad when it comes to how these creatures look. Ugh. I'll get to it more towards the end of the plot synopsis that I'm going down here. But anyway, so the dude's like, "All right, I got these pills. I'm going to go upstairs now since I broke the booze to clean it up." And he's taking a piss, and then all of a sudden, the bear's there. And he's like, "Ooh, spooky." So he pees everywhere, and he's like, "Oh, man, I'm just tripping because I'm doing pills." And then all of a sudden, the bear's back again. And this is like that scene in the trailer where the ring's going, and it's like playing the sound effects, and the bear's getting closer, and then it stops. And then the like fucking first jump scare of the movie happens where the bear pops out to scare him, and he goes, "Whoa!" And then he falls over and runs away. That's that whole scene, and that dude doesn't have any role to play in this film at all. It's not like he died there or anything. All it was here for was to deliver a cheap jump scare and nothing else. So, like, Jessica comes home shortly after, and she's very disappointed in the older daughter for bringing this boy over. And then the boy's mother comes over and is like, "I'm so sorry, my son did this." And then Jessica's like, "Yeah, and he also brought these drugs." And then the mom goes, "These aren't drugs, this is my allergy medication." Which is, I mean, okay, I guess. So the dude was tripping off Allegra, I suppose, Claritin, I guess. It's so stupid, and it has no role to play in the film, but it's here for some reason. And then you never see that guy again. He's never even referenced again. So now Jessica and the two daughters are once again just home alone. The imaginary friend situation's getting worse. She calls a therapist over to try and, do something about Chauncey, the imaginary friend. The therapist is kind of odd, where the therapist is trying to get her to explore, her feelings with Chauncey, which leads to a fight between the daughter and Chauncey. And then the therapist is like, "Has your daughter taken up ventriloquism?" Jessica's like, "Fucking obviously not. My 6-year-old daughter hasn't been studying ventriloquism. Why are you asking?" And the therapist goes, "Well, because, it was weird." Because what happened during the therapy session is Chauncey was speaking in the voice of the daughter, and eventually the daughter turns around while panicked and crying, and the therapist noticed her mouth wasn't moving, but words were still coming out, so she's like, oh, it must be ventriloquism. And then eventually the therapist is like, well, I've noticed some, in previous cases, when an imaginary friend gets hostile and evil, a kid disappears. So good luck. And then she leaves. She plays a video of like some other kid talking about her or his imaginary friend who made him chop off his thumb, and then like the kid went missing right after. So after playing that video, the therapist is like, all right, so I'm out ski. Also, don't forget to pay my bill. And she just leaves, never to be seen again. But this whole sequence was extremely important to the film because it delivers the big twist. So that bear that the daughter found and has been carrying around the entire movie, talking to with her imaginary friend, turns out wasn't real. It was all in Jessica's mind. No one else was seeing the bear. The therapist recorded the session and proved that that bear was never actually there. It was nothing. It was an imaginary friend. But Jessica's been seeing it this whole time because it turns out that bear was Jessica's original imaginary friend when she lived in this house. So only she is capable of seeing that bear. It actually wouldn't be the worst twist in the world if it wasn't in such a bad movie. I didn't see it coming. Neither Aaron nor myself expected that, because why would they even bother putting a twist in a movie that has this little effort in it to begin with? But like, admittedly, it's not the worst idea creatively to have that be like a grand reveal, like, oh, that was never real. Like, it could work, but it doesn't here because no one cares. By this point in the film, you're already so mentally checked out, probably snoozing, that it falls flat. It really does. But man, my voice is cracking even going over this movie. But anyway, so then she starts realizing that this goes really deep. The reason she can't remember anything is because of her imaginary friend and whatever happened to her back then. So she's connecting these dots about the never ever, and then like a door, and then she's researching it, and then the daughter disappears. So the daughter vanishes, and turns out she completed the scavenger hunt for Chauncey, which opened a portal to the imagination dimension. She's joining SpongeBob and Patrick in the imagination box land now. So then Jessica and the older daughter are freaking out. They called the police to start looking for her. And then an old woman, whom we did see briefly earlier in the film, who was previously Jessica's babysitter, starts just exposition dumping everything here. Also, that old lady, her name was Gloria. She was seen earlier in the film, but kind of just as like this standoffish asshole. So, like, Gloria's talking to Jessica about being her babysitter, and then the little girl comes over, and then the old lady immediately gets combative with the little girl, where she's like, you shouldn't really interrupt us, we're in the middle of a conversation. And then the little girl's like, oh, okay, maybe Chauncey should eat you. And then Gloria actually laughs and goes, haha, oh, children and their imagination, it's so cool, until they get violent. Basically just like I thought Gloria was about to start beating this little kid's ass. Like, she was like about to throw up a set here and get pugilistic with her. Like, Gloria was just immediately weird. But then she's seen here during the vanishing of the little girl, and she starts telling the older sibling, like, look, imaginary friends are real. Usually they're benevolent, helpful spirits that kids grow out of, but sometimes there's evil ones that latch on to a child and feed off their imagination. And Jessica had such a creative, vibrant imagination that imaginary friend didn't want to lose her, so actually stole Jessica into the imagination dimension, and Jessica eventually escaped. But now it's lived in that house for all these years and has taken Alice, the little girl, to try and get Jessica back. So we've got to do something. So now they've recruited the Avengers here. They got Gloria, the geriatric old octogenarian. They've got Jessica, and they've got the older daughter. They perform the ritual themselves, open up the portal, and confront Chauncey directly, whom takes on the form of a real ferocious bear. And Gloria reveals herself to be a villain, where she traps them in the imagination dimension because Gloria said that Chauncey gave her the directions to where they'd be promised this land of freedom where they can be young again. Their imagination comes to life. Imagination has power here, this and that. And then she eventually gets slapped by Chauncey, dragged into a room, and then blows up into an explosion of blood. So that's how Gloria dies. She's also the only death in the movie. for some reason. Sorry, my nose was running because this shit is actually making my sinuses flare up. But yeah, so Gloria's dead now, and no one cares. So they just go on and keep looking for Alice. They eventually find Alice, who doesn't want to leave initially until Jessica starts breaking things, and then Alice is like, this is fun, I'll start breaking things. Okay, I'm ready to leave. Bye, Chauncey. And then Chauncey just kind of lets them leave, but then grabs Jessica and is like, you're not leaving, I like your imagination a lot, so you're staying here with me. And again, he's still in this giant bear shape, and it looks terrible. It looks absolutely terrible. I don't know, like, I understand these movies are supposed to be made low budget, but you can do better creature designs. Like, from a design perspective, you can do better than what this has to offer. And maybe just don't show it so point blank, because then you really see all of its flaws. So she's being taken by this goddamn fucking Five Nights at Freddy's throwaway animatronic looking bear, and then gets saved by the older sibling, who grabs her and gets her out of there. But then there's another twist, because it turns out she didn't actually save her. It wasn't a happily ever after. Jessica's still there. And then they just repeat it where the girl goes in and saves her again. And then they burn the house down. I've skipped quite a bit of the movie, but it doesn't matter. You're not going to watch it anyway. No one was planning to. But I already went there and saw it, so I just got to fucking talk about it, because it's so stupid. It's so dumb. It's just, it's a movie that's made for the sake of just putting a movie out there to try and get some money in return, because it's so cheap, you will make a profit off it. Like, it's a smart business strategy, and I've always said that about Blumhouse. It's a really smart business strategy. And there's probably, like, some kind of tax write-off element for it, too, I imagine. So, like, these movies, like Imaginary, they fucking suck. Like, this one was at points fun bad, I will say. There were definitely fun bad moments of it, but it still wasn't worth seeing in any capacity. But, oh well. Yep, so that's Imaginary in a nutshell. There's nothing good about it. Like, I guess there's a couple of decent ideas, and by a couple I mean one, where, like, the twist is the bear was never really there. And then, like, I guess the fake out ending, which was totally meaningless and didn't really do anything, I guess that was a creative idea too. But they also only let that twist sit for like 2 seconds, where they get her out and then it's immediately a happily ever after, and she's like, no, I'm still here. And then they immediately get her out, and then it's the real happily ever after. It's just, I don't know, bad movie. Very bad movie. That's really about it. See ya.